Good morning, everybody. It gives me a great pleasure in welcome the more than 450 people that registered for the launch of the new version of the Business in the Community Ireland Low Carbon Pledge. We are delighted to be joined by our special guest this morning, Minister Eamon Ryan, and I'll come back to him in just a few minutes, but I also want to warmly welcome other members of the Houses of the Oireachtas, our signatory members of the business community, academia, and NGO. So you're all very welcome. Just before we start, a tiny bit of housekeeping. First thing is to say that this webinar is being recorded. Secondly, to say, in order to make this event more inclusive, we have incorporated a closed captioning function. The instructions are on the screen, and if you have any questions around it, please use the Q&A function for support from the team. Thirdly, to say, if you have any questions or comments, we're quite tight on time, but we will endeavor to come back to anybody that has any questions or comments addressed to us or to the speakers this morning. So looking forward to that engagement as well. And finally, for those of you that are very active on social media, you can see at the bottom of the screen, please tag at BITCI Ireland and use the hashtag low carbon pledge. Okay, there's nothing more exciting than the announcement that we're making this morning, and without any further delay, I want to unveil the 61 companies that have signed up to the new version of the Business in the Community Ireland Low Carbon Pledge. And I am hoping you will be able to see them in your screens right now. And the first thing is to say is congratulations to all the signatory companies. So obviously you're probably asking, what have these companies signed up to? So the new version of the Low Carbon Pledge, which is signed off at CEO level, mandates companies to set science-based carbon emission reduction targets no later than 2024. So what does science-based mean? Essentially, science-based means two things. Number one, that the targets that these companies will set are aligned with what is the latest understanding on climate science. That is targets that have to be aligned with the Paris Agreement, and therefore ensure that at company, sector, and country level, emissions will be below or way below 1.5 degrees of global warming. And the second thing is that the targets that these companies will set will be externally validated. And that is the gold standard when it comes to setting targets for reducing carbon emissions. Secondly, companies during the intervening period of the Low Carbon Pledge will commit to three things: to record their emissions across all operations, scope 1, 2, and 3. Secondly, to report, and there's a double reporting mechanism. Companies will be reporting individually on their journey to reducing carbon emissions across their operations. And also companies will report collectively through an annual Business in the Community Ireland report on how collectively we are going into that journey of reducing our emissions. And thirdly, companies are committing to review periodically the targets being set to ensure that they are aligned with best practice and with the global ambition which is net zero as soon as possible. So this morning is about unveiling this ambition, but it's also great timing because yesterday government published a draft. The government published the climate bill, not the draft, apologies, the climate bill. And it's great timing that Minister Eamon Ryan is here with us this morning to share his ambition and the government's ambition around the implementation of this bill. And I will hand over now to the Minister. And the main thing I would like to say, Minister, is on the one hand, how delighted we are that you're here with us this morning. Secondly, that I hope you will see the Low Carbon Pledge as an instrument that will help support into that vision that government has for decarbonisation. And finally, to say we're very much looking forward to hearing on your vision as to how business can engage in the agenda that the government has set with this significant milestone of the bill published yesterday. Minister, floor is yours.
Thomas, good morning, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having this opportunity of joining you. And I want to commend Business in the Community for this new initiative, those 60-odd companies really committing to follow science-based advice and live up to the Paris Climate Agreement. I think it's very good timing following on the announcements at the launch or the approval yesterday in Cabinet of our new climate bill. I might just give a broad background, I suppose, and before coming back to the business role in this, or the business sector's role in it. First, I suppose, to explain some of the legislative path and what we're doing. And it is very much a path. It's going to take several decades for us to achieve this net zero objective, but we're starting now in the right direction. I have a sense of a real commitment across the country, in the political system, among our people, that we want to be good at this. I think that's been helped in recent years by the cross-party and inclusive approach that we've taken on climate policy. I think Citizens Assembly here, we were probably the first country to do a Citizens Assembly on this climate issue, and it worked really well. And that fed into a joint Oireachtas committee, which worked very well again, I think, in setting high ambition and working with my predecessor, Richard Bruton, in the development of the outgoing 2019 Climate Action Plan. But we are now going further. That was ambitious and it was challenging, but we're now setting a higher target. And particularly this interim target of a 50%, 51% reduction in the next decade is really challenging. I mean, I was see the newspaper headlines today saying, top and leading world. It is pretty much. I don't have an example before us of a country which has halved its emissions in a decade. So what we're looking to do is hugely challenging. But it is in line with what the science is saying. Just to back up what your approach and analysis, this is what the science says we need to do to meet the Paris target of trying to restrict global temperature increases below 1.5 degrees. And I think also, okay, so it's what the science is saying, but it will also bring benefits because, as the Taoiseach said yesterday, those who are early adopters, those who are really ambitious, will learn by doing, will gain first mover economic advantage because the rest of the world is going in this direction, all continents and all leading modern economies. So we as a modern economy, which seeks to be ahead of the curve in terms of new industrial development, new technological development, this is in our interest to be ambitious and to be really going for the transition. And all the analysis that I've seen shows that not only do early adopters get a technological advantage, but actually there's an economic advantage, that it is always cheaper to act quickly in this instance rather than delaying. The legislation sets out the framework within which we will achieve our objectives. It appoints a much stronger new Climate Advisory Council that will set out a series of 3 5-year budgets at the start of this path and transition to net zero. It will require us as a government to respond, adopt those, and then adopt a new, more ambitious plan, an update, as it were, of the 2019 plan. And we're in a tight timeline. We want to include this year in our first 5-year budget. So to make that happen, subject to the bill getting through the Dáil, we'll have the Climate Advisory Council presenting its first budget proposals early this summer. At the same time, we will develop this new Climate Action Plan, very ambitious plan. We'll be doing that in conjunction with the development of review of the National Development Plan. So it's timely and appropriate we do it. And it is central to the government's new economic recovery strategy that's critical to get us out of our COVID crisis. So it's a very tight timeline. The next 6 months are going to be very busy. We're going to engage in a public consultation immediately on this new Climate Action Plan. I'd be really keen to get the input of businesses into this consultation and to hear your views and how it matches what some of your own initiatives and thinking is. It also matches what's going on in Europe and what's going on internationally. The Biden administration's recommitment to the Paris Climate Agreement is critical. What the Chinese administration has set as a target of their going net zero by 2060 is very significant. So we're not doing this alone. The European Union, I was at the Council of Ministers meeting on Friday where we're agreeing to try and get our own European climate law, and Europe will in negotiation with the Parliament, set what's likely to be a 55% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. The Recovery and Resilience Fund, €700 billion fund, backs that up. And we're hoping that the European climate law might be agreed in time for a major seminar that the US administration are hosting on the 22nd of April next, Earth Day, but also I think really the start of a big international launching campaign on climate, which we hope will culminate in a successful meeting of the parties of the UN in Glasgow this November. Okay, obviously our entire focus at the moment is on COVID and managing the immediate crisis, but I think people hopefully can expect that as we start to see vaccination programs become widespread by this summer, that into this autumn, climate is going to be center stage in international diplomacy, in European politics, and that will have knock on, or I'm sure it's the same in the business community. It will be with the view to us collectively really making a leap in Glasgow, which the Paris Climate Agreement contains this mechanism, 5-year review, requiring us to make this next huge leap into a low carbon future. Can I say lastly, and I'm very conscious I could spend all morning here, I suppose, looking at the various implications for the business world. It is first and foremost, we're going to have to reduce those 8 million tons from industrial processing mainly, is going to have to be at least halved by 2030. I think we can do that. I think that's a decade's notice we're giving here now, means that we can start to look at fuel substitution for large heat applications. We also know the circular economy policy, the waste action plan that my department has developed is a really good plan, being developed in conjunction with industry, which I think is what works well in this country when we do work collectively together. There's some 200 actions in that. And again, it's giving a notice for a business that we're going to change our entire packaging and waste management system to stop single-use plastic, have no non-recyclable plastic. Massive expansion and increase and improvement in our level of recycling, reduce and reusing of materials. And that's where the business community kicks in terms of doing what you do well, which is thinking ahead 5-10 years and start designing now a different production and distribution and recycling process for your products that mean that industry is playing its part, that the circular economy really grows. I think what I'm really interested in your work is that that verification of the commitments you're making, that independent verification is really significant. The commitment, as I see it in your science-based targets that you're adopting to what's called the Scope 3 emissions and really accounting for that upstream and downstream in terms of what your suppliers are doing and what your customers are doing. And I think that's where good business practices is going. It'll bring transparency, accountability and efficiency and profitability in the end from efficiency and from, customer loyalty, because customers will want now, they don't want to be dealing with companies which are not taking this issue seriously in my mind. So if a business isn't thinking this way, there's a real risk. It's a real risk for the business that I think increasingly the financial community and the accounting and the insurance industries realize is a risk that has to be counted first and foremost. So what you're doing backs up what government's doing. It's exactly what we want, which is we do well as a country when we pull together on a common course. I think we have that. In the political world, we'll have rows and fights around details of the legislation we've just agreed, but the overall direction of travel, it's cross-party. It's rural and urban. It's young versus old. It's not something that divides us. We've seen in the past, this country was very good in a previous transition. We transitioned from a closed economy in the late 50s, early 60s to being an open economy. We did that because we had that stability of common purpose for 20, 30 years. It allowed us to invest in education, and join Europe, set up the likes of our foreign direct investment systems. Well, it's the same now. In the next 5, 10, 20 years, we're going on this route to decarbonize our country, to restore nature at the same time, to create this new circular, digital, very efficient economy. And we'll do it when we're working together. social justice organizations, business organizations, and government and environmental organizations. And that's happening. We have a partnership approach in this country that gives us strength, in my mind. So I look forward to working with you, the business community, and the others in meeting common, as we do together, these science-based targets and creating a more secure, stable, and successful economy out of it. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I really appreciate your words, your vision. I think what the way you're describing ambition. So the first thing to say is congratulations for ensuring that Ireland has that high level of ambition and that Ireland wants to be one of the leaders on this. And secondly, to say that I couldn't agree more with you around collaboration. And one of the success factors of this initiative, the Low Carbon Pledge, is collaboration. And I sincerely hope that we will be part of that collaboration ecosystem that you are describing. So again, I want to thank you sincerely for your endorsement this morning and for your support, and wish all the best in terms of the passing of the legislation through the Oireachtas and its consultation and future implementation. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Thomas.
Pleasure. And in order to continue with our event, I would like to step back and go back to the Low Carbon Pledge for a minute. And for those who don't know us, Business in the Community Ireland is a movement for change in business. We have been working for the last 21 years with some of Ireland's largest companies in advancing our vision, which is very much about a low carbon economy and an inclusive society where everyone thrives. And that is what drives all the work that we do in advising and guiding companies on their sustainability or ESG initiatives, agendas, vision, and strategy. And I'm sure that all the businesses that are here this morning are very concerned about ESG and sustainability. And you've just heard from the Minister, the imperative and the inevitability of this is clear, and it's something we all need to work towards. I'm not going to do a very long history lesson, but 14 years ago, Business in the Community Ireland held its first ever CEO gathering. Nobel laureate, Maynooth University Professor John Sweeney spoke at that event. He spoke about droughts, he spoke about floods, he spoke about extreme weather events, more so than being something that would be challenging from a lifestyle perspective. He spoke about this weather events being detrimental to economic activity. Was he right? Even if you think about the latest shortage we're seeing of microchip industry, part of that is due to the severe weather that happened in Texas at the beginning of the year and how that paralyzed a significant element of that industry and the knock-on effects it's happening. So climate change is real, and that's when we started the conversation in Business in the Community. 2018, we launched the first iteration of this pledge with 47 companies focusing on direct emissions, scope 1 and 2, and focusing on measuring and reporting on carbon intensity. And then that moved on, and last year we had 58 companies, and we incorporated some elements in the Low Carbon Pledge of indirect emissions, namely waste, water, and business travel. Our Low Carbon Pledge is supported and led by a low carbon subgroup, which is co-chaired by Dennis O'Sullivan, Managing Director of Gas Networks Ireland, and Mark Foley, CEO of EirGrid. And they have challenged us to continue to raise the ambition, and therefore the pledge that you are seeing today, which is taking the commitments an extra level forward. We are delighted that there has been such interest and that 61 of our member companies have signed up, and we sincerely hope that more companies will continue to do so. In order to make this a credible journey, and as the Minister was mentioning, we partnered with PwC, and in 2019 and last year we produced a collective report charting the evolution of the pledge. I'm delighted to say that we will continue that a partnership with PwC to ensure that the commitments that will be carried over in this new version of the pledge will be also manifested through the report, and we'll be able to see what best practice looks like. Because it's very easy to talk about scope 3 emissions, but it is a very complex world out there when it comes to looking at emissions across the supply chain. And last October, we published landmark research that clearly looked at some of the barriers and obstacles that companies were facing when it came to Scope 3 indirect emissions. So obviously, that's another area we're going to work together. As I said before, the key success in the low carbon pledge is the collaboration, it's the peer support, it's the signatory companies coming together and sharing their challenges as well as their best practices and trying to find common solutions to some of these challenges that are going to become apparent as we move along. Final thing I will say about the low carbon pledge, it's an initiative that is offered to the members of Business in the Community Ireland, and we sincerely hope that more will sign up to over the coming weeks and months, and that will continue to show a very strong, credible force in terms of moving towards that decarbonised Ireland vision that was presented to us by the Minister earlier. I think at the end of the day, it's to stay with that notion that Eamon Ryan described of seeking the opportunities that they're out there in terms of the low carbon economy, more so than just the element of managing the risk that is coming towards us. But we'll talk more about that later on. I think now we need to move to an even more exciting part of this session, which is a conversation with 3 of the signatory companies of the low carbon pledge. So in order to lead that conversation, I want to hand over to my colleague Nick Reynolds, who's our environmental expert within the team. And I really look forward to hearing from you, Nick, and from the companies that are having to do the real hard work in making this low carbon pledge a reality. Nick, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Thomas. Oh, can you hear me okay there? Perfect. Thanks, Thomas. And thanks for sharing our vision of the low carbon pledge. I just wanted to take this time at the beginning just to congratulate all 61 signatory companies for your leadership and committing to set ambitious climate and environmental targets. My name is Nick Reynolds, as Thomas said, and I lead out on the work in our low carbon pledge initiative. The pledge has taken significant strides forward in ambition over the last few months, as we've already heard today, now focusing on our emissions across our value chains. To achieve this level of ambition, we'll be forced to change the way we do our jobs, how we engage our stakeholders, and how we design and produce our products and our services, and inevitably, how we run our businesses. Today's panel session will focus on just this. We'll have a little deeper into how SBTs challenge us across various sectors, as well as within the different roles within our organizations. So today I'm going to be joined by 3 of our signatory members, who I'm going to ask to turn on their cameras now and their mics. And I'm very delighted to be joined today by Jill Higgins, Head of Sustainability at Dawn Meats, Sarah Dempsey, Head of Sustainability Communications and Partnerships at AIB, and Andrew Flynn, General Manager at Janssen Island. Thanks so much for joining me today. And really looking forward to this discussion. So we're going to get right into it. And my first question for each of you will be a 2-part question. And Jill, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Dawn Meats has shown to be really progressive, very progressive in your approach to climate action. Can you briefly take a moment and just share Dawn Meats' climate vision with us?
Sure. So firstly, good morning, Nick, and good morning to everybody. Thank you to BITCI for having me to speak here today. So Dawn Meats are one of Europe's leading meat processors, and we export over 50 markets around the world. So listening to climate scientists and experts speak around the world, we recognize that climate change is one of the most immense challenges that we face today. And acknowledging that we all have a part to play, we signed up to the Science Based Targets Initiative, and our targets were approved back in 2019. And then last year in 2020, we wrote our first climate action plan, focusing on actions that we could take in the short, medium and longer term. So, for example, to reduce our Scope 2 emissions, we now procure 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. Across our operations in Ireland and the UK, we will continue to reduce our Scope 1 emissions by optimising water and energy efficiency, by progressively reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, and upgrading our refrigeration systems, to name just a few actions. This year, as part of our membership of the Low Carbon Pledge, we will increase our ambition and align our science-based targets with the requirements of the Paris Agreement, and this will place us on a net zero carbon trajectory. So addressing our supply chain or our Scope 3 agricultural emissions is a significant task, and this is one that we cannot achieve in isolation. So we have about 30,000 farming businesses in our supply base, and it's only by working together at sectoral and national levels that we can reduce emissions on a meaningful scale. So as a business, we work directly with suppliers and customers on a range of projects, and we also facilitate knowledge sharing initiatives. Our focus is on the continued adoption of sustainable farming practices. So practices which not only reduce and sequester emissions, but which also promote biodiversity, soil health, and other environmental benefits. So these elements, coupled with appropriate land use management, are essential for an optimized approach to climate action. And then finally, it's essential that public policy and strategy are aligned. So this will encourage the adoption of more sustainable practices by rewarding farmers who implement these practices.
Fantastic. And it's amazing to see over the years how quickly you've been able to move this agenda going forward. And I think that just leads into my next question. Now that you've set your SBTs, you're working on your climate action roadmap as we speak. What were some of the key challenges and barriers that you encountered during this journey? And touching on that first point I made, how did you get through it so quickly to be where you are today?
Indeed, good question. So there were many challenges. I would begin by saying that climate change and climate action, it's a difficult subject. So it's not as easy for people to understand as other sustainability topics may be. So what I mean by that is there are new terms and definitions and new methodologies which need to be explained. And for many business people, a whole new field needs to be learned. So levels of knowledge vary greatly, and I have found within our own business that a good approach is to spend time with key decision makers and tease out the challenges presented by the climate action plan. So this could be done by examining, for example, alternative approaches which will allow us to achieve our targets. Another challenge would be to keep pace with the new reports, the policies and guidance. So new information is published almost every day. So it's essential to have a cross-functional team in place to monitor these developments and regulations and to understand the impact that they might have on our climate action plan. A third challenge would be that Dawn, among many other businesses, do not yet have a clear picture as to how we'll fully achieve our Scope 3 science-based targets. So solutions, and this is because solutions have yet to emerge. So also across the board, we have a good distance to go to improve our understanding of Scope 3 emissions and the accounting methodologies. So as a business, we developed our climate action plan without having all of the answers, but we did not let this discourage us from moving forward to tackle supply chain emissions. And I will conclude by saying that strong governance and understanding of climate-related risks and opportunities is key to managing the risks effectively and preparing to avail of opportunities as they arise. So, for example, at Dawn, we have a sustainability executive, and this is led by our CEO, and it includes directors from operations, engineering, commercial and technical, as well as myself as head of sustainability. So the executive review our climate action plan. Projects are carried out by experts and senior reps from business functions, including finance, sustainability, agriculture, and environmental engineering. So in summary, what you need is persistence, encouragement, strong leadership, and an agreed strategy with a clear roadmap.
Brilliant, Joel. And I think you touched on it. Leadership buy-in is absolutely vital. And that brings me to you, Andrew. And before I get into my more detailed question, I just want to give you a moment to share with us J&J's vision around climate action and your setting of science-based targets.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for inviting me to join today's panel. It has been wonderful to hear from Minister Eamon Ryan this morning, and we at Johnson & Johnson family of companies in Ireland, we're proud to add our signature to the Low Carbon Pledge. The key strength of the pledge lies in the platform it creates to share learnings, challenges and success as we all work collaboratively to deliver the change required. So I am delighted to be here today to share with you some of the work we're doing at Janssen Pharmaceutical Sciences, but also across the broader Johnson & Johnson family of companies to address climate change. At Johnson & Johnson, we understand that human health and environmental health are inextricably linked. Put simply, healthy people need a healthy planet. We began setting public climate goals 20 years ago, and our climate commitments are our boldest and most ambitious yet. Building on our strength and our history of climate action, by 2030, we aim to achieve carbon neutrality in all our operations. To help meet this goal, we are aggressively accelerating our target for 100% renewable electricity throughout our global operations by 2025. In addition, we are committing to work with our suppliers to reduce our upstream carbon footprint by 20% by 2030. So this work will deliver almost 2.5 times the carbon footprint compared to the reduction in our own operations. Johnson & Johnson has a presence in Ireland since 1935. We are 5,000 colleagues strong, and we have 10 sites supporting pharmaceuticals, medical device, and consumer health business. J&J Ireland sites have been pioneers when it comes to climate action. In the last decade, we have invested more than 60 million euro in over 80 carbon footprint reduction projects. Recently, our Janssen Sciences Ireland site in Cork achieved the LEED Silver certification. So this is the leadership in energy and environmental design for green buildings. And its features include for us charging stations for up to 22 electric vehicles, covered bicycle parking, open spaces protecting natural vegetation, adjustable sunshades on each building level that reduce the solar glare and the heat gain. And also on site, we have wind turbine, which provides renewable energy for approximately 50% of the site's electricity usage. So this is just one of our 4 turbines that we have within the Irish sites. So we place great importance and value on the business working collaboratively on issues such as climate change. And that is why we're excited and proud to be part of this business in the community low carbon pledge.
Fantastic, Andrew. And I just wanted to touch on going back to Jill, one of Jill's points that she made around the importance of leadership buy-in. And you, as the general manager of one of the manufacturing sites within the J&J group, what do you see yours and your senior leadership team's role on this agenda going forward?
Yeah, as a global manufacturer, we recognize our role in helping to conserve and protect natural resources. And as a general manager in Janssen Pharmaceutical Sciences, I'm committed to using our expertise and our resources to reduce our environmental footprint in our operations, our products, and our extended supply chain. Our leadership team continues to set ambitious targets, but also to ensure that we are transparent and that we can be measured against our peers. So, for example, we use the ISO 50001 standard in energy management, and in the last year, we've been certified in that. So that's a reflection on both our leadership commitment, but also on our employees and the efforts that they have put into achieving these goals. You know, in our leadership team, it's everybody's responsibility to set leadership goals to achieve and maintain the best-in-class environmental, health and safety and sustainability performance. And their responsibility is to cascade this throughout the organization. Yeah. In terms of accountability, then, we update regularly our employees on our site performance, through leadership team meetings or newsletters. And again, it's clear the onus that's on leadership in terms of what targets we're setting, but also we create an awareness within our employees. So if we don't deliver on those goals, we will be called to account by our employees. They're all engaged in this and they all expect us to be leading the way in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, and I think that's great points that you made there. And the whole SBTs, the wider sustainability agenda, I think is going to continue to be a big talking point or focal point at your senior team meetings in the future to come. And lastly, by no means least, one to you, Sarah. AIB have been on quite the sustainability journey over the past few years, really ramping up your ambitions in this area. Can you share with us your vision of where sustainability sits within the organization? And then just to add to that, why is it so important for where you want to see AIB in the years to come?
Sure. Okay. So Nick, thanks a million for having us today, and to Thomas as well. We're really delighted to be here. AIB in Ireland kind of nearly needs no introduction. We are literally systemic in terms of the economy, in terms of society, and in terms of communities. You know, as Andrew has talked to, you know, the pandemic has proven that you know, we rely heavily on having a healthy economy, because a healthy economy, healthy people need a healthy economy, and we all need a healthy planet. So, you know, they are inextricably linked, and the pandemic has really served to bring sustainability and ESG right to the front and centre. And as the Minister said, you know, while now we are dealing very much in the immediacy of COVID and indeed Brexit and all that that's bringing, you know, this is coming front of stage, and certainly COP26 in November and what happens in Glasgow, and our own involvement in Climate Finance Week, etc. You know, the second half of this year will be very much focused on this agenda. In terms of sustainability, you know, it's absolutely clear to say that sustainability is central to AIB. Sustainability is core to our corporate strategy. We have 5 pillars. Sustainability is one of them. And as such, we have clear metrics and targets, which I'll come on to, but it's very much BAU for everybody in terms of what we do. To make it real and to be successful, and I think as Andrew and Jill have alluded to, it requires leadership. We have a board committee, so as a bank we are regulated to have certain board committees, but we actually also have a board committee on sustainability, which has some of our non-exec directors and our executive directors, our executive team. We have a CEO who has absolutely made this his priority under his tenure. And we also have accountability at the executive table in terms of responsibility there. So it's central to the leadership of the business. We've also been very thoughtful and very purposeful about how we actually go about delivering that strategy. And it starts from the inside out. So in terms of our own carbon footprint on our own operations, we've set a commitment, we were the first Irish bank to do so, about becoming carbon neutral using a net zero approach by 2030. And we're making progress on that. You know, 40%, we've reduced our own carbon emissions by 40% since 2014. We've been on the leadership rating CDP, A-rated for the last 5 years. So that means an awful lot to us. However, then when you start looking outside of kind of our own operations and the impact we have, you know, you look to suppliers and you look to customers and you look to communities. And with our supplier set, and again, I think the Minister alluded to it, we have 4,000 suppliers who provide services to AIB. Some of them are large multinationals. Many of them are small SMEs that are the lifeblood of this economy. And to bring people with us and to bring people on the transition, which I'm happy to talk further on, we need to bring everybody on the same journey. And therefore, we have a responsible supplier code that we put into place at the back end of last year, which clearly sets out the kind of expectations of suppliers to AIB and really like-minded people and organisations who we want to work with, including encouraging them towards CDP and business in the community and bringing them on the journey. In terms of customers, you know, the majority of our carbon emission goes with the capital that we lend out to the economy. And therefore, it's really important that we bring them on this journey. Not just really important, it is critical. In 2020, we've just issued our latest sustainability report, and in 2020, 16% of our lending was to kind of the green economy, and that's really, really important. And that's a number of things. We have a green mortgage, which has been extremely successful. 335 million in the last 12 months has gone out the door in green mortgages. We've got green consumer loans in terms of retrofitting electric vehicles, etc. On the corporate side of the house, we have introduced sustainability-linked loans. I think, in fact, Dawn Meats were profiled in our sustainability report for their work with us on the sustainability-linked loans. And we were the first Irish bank to issue a green bond. So we're really putting a huge amount of focus and effort, thoughtful focus and effort, into our customer base and trying to bring our customers with us. There's more to come. And then also we are working with communities, and this is the last point. Communities are critical, bread and butter. And you know, one of our biggest community partners is Food Cloud, who I know we're in the Irish Times this morning talking about, 30% of carbon comes from the food system. So it's really, really important that people try and understand how they themselves at a very small level and a very big level can actually make a difference. So net, we've made incredible progress. We now want 70% of our lending by 2030 to be either transition or green. We've made progress, but there's an awful lot more to do. And we'll be hand in glove with the government and society in making that transition. Fantastic.
And I think you touched on two really great points there, Sarah, about integrating sustainability into the business strategy. And it's a continuous piece of work that you're going to have to keep on working at, and having that leadership is so vital. And then the other one is just how significant the role of the financial sector will play in climate action going forward into the future. Jill, back to you. And I think we all know the agricultural sector is going to be a tough one to crack, especially here in Ireland, as it plays an integral part in our economy. So looking forward 5-10 years, what needs to happen for you and for the sector in order for you to reach these very, very ambitious targets that have been set upon you? It's a tough one.
It is, that's a tough question. Well, first of all, I'd say what Sarah's just spoken about, integrating finance and climate and sustainability and finance all together, absolutely critical and key, and it's fantastic to see it move forward, and we were delighted to sign up to the sustainability linked loans as well, so that was great. But for our own industry, I would start off by saying what everybody says: cooperation and collaboration. For example, through groups such as the Low Carbon Pledge. This is absolutely essential for reducing emissions on a national and a global scale. So, and as we're all aware, the global ambition has actually moved beyond science-based targets with a 5 to 15-year time horizon to talk about, net zero targets. So net zero emissions and net zero carbon targets with a 20 to 30-year time horizon. So at present, it's not known how we will reduce agricultural emissions to net zero, as some emissions, such as, for example, biogenic methane, cannot be eliminated. So biogenic methane arises from livestock digesting their food. So the livestock sector, therefore, will have to work with other sectors to offset residual emissions. A good example would be here in Ireland, we have Origin Green. So this is a national and public and private sector collaboration. So about 92% of our beef and lamb farmers are members of Origin Green through Board BIA's Sustainable Beef and Lamb Assurance schemes. So under the scheme, the farms undergo sustainability audits or assessments every 18 months. Part of this is the carbon footprinting of the farms, and feedback reports are given to each farmer with recommended actions that farmers can take to reduce their carbon footprint. In the UK, we are working with several voluntary groups to align the food industry on a common framework for measuring and communicating on-farm sustainability. We are also working with these voluntary groups to deliver a set of consistent Scope 3 accounting principles for the UK food and drink industry. So these principles will be in accordance with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 standard and compliant with the TCFD recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, public policy needs to encourage the adoption of sustainable practices by rewarding farmers. So, for example, a new carbon farming initiative under the European Climate Pact will promote a new business model to reward farmers who apply practices that remove and sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And this will be done either via the Common Agricultural Policy or some other public or private initiatives, for example, a new carbon market. So this will be really useful in that it would both provide farmers with a new source of income and also help other sectors to decarbonise the food chain. So the EU Commission has said that it will develop a regulatory framework for certifying carbon removals, and this will be based on robust and transparent accounting and will be important for monitoring and verifying the authenticity of these carbon removals.
Fantastic. And I know it's definitely going to be a challenge, not just for your sector to reach these really ambitious targets, but for a lot of the others. And I think one thing to just call out there, what you said is collaboration, specifically collaboration across sectors, will be key to helping us create that innovation and those new ideas going forward. Andrew, back to yourself. How do you see targets like SBTs and even the wider sustainability targets going to impact your operations and the strategic decisions that you're making across the business at the moment and going into the next few years?
Yeah, okay. So our climate and renewable energy goals, they're a fundamental part of how we do business, and they impact every decision that we make, from how we design our campus to our energy choices and the suppliers that we work with. So if you take energy for an example, so in Johnson & Johnson Campus Ireland, we have an energy team that is responsible for energy performance improvement across all the sites in Ireland. So in the last 4 years, we've seen significant expansion in our footprint, and that team set out an ambitious plan to mitigate, that we can keep our carbon footprint neutral and reduce it in terms of that growth. So they introduced a 3-pillar approach. So if you take it, they looked at energy efficiency improvements. So they implemented multiple energy efficiency projects, resulting in an annualized energy saving of 43 gigawatt hours. They focused on on-site renewable energy generation. So Campus Ireland now generates its own renewable energy through 4 3-megawatt wind turbines in Cork and Limerick, 3 combined heat and power units, and 667 roof-mounted solar panels. And then the third part then was wind power purchase agreement. So building on the success of the renewable energy sources on our sites, and it's really a tremendous source of pride for our employees, but we also realized that by buying renewable electricity, we can accelerate our progress. So through a power purchase agreement and on-site renewable energy generation, we're now delighted to say that we have 100% of our energy requirements for our 4 main manufacturing sites in Ireland are being met by renewable energy sources. So that's just one example, but it's not about the big capital investments. As a manufacturing site, our supply chain is incredibly important to us, and I spoke about that earlier. So if you take an example of how we're trying to achieve our targets in the supply chain, we have a sustainable procurement program, and that's really a program where, as we select and enter into agreements with our partners and our suppliers, we assess are their climate action and sustainability goals aligned with our organizational goals, and work with them to set environmental to drive social and environmental improvement, set clear targets, and improve transparency through our supply base. So we work with our suppliers, we do assessments, and we see year-on-year improvement in terms of performance. And we create transparency around this, and we make public the findings that we find. So that's driving an action throughout the supply chain, and that's what's going to help us to achieve those targets. If just going back to what Sarah mentioned and Jill, just linking back, it's not all about the big items. So for example, we're working with our local catering suppliers, and we've reduced delivery frequency on site by 40%. So that's having a positive impact in terms of transportation and our carbon footprint. We're now sourcing all of our catering supplies locally. So again, all these small items, we're chasing the large items and the small items. We're now working with our supplier to put in a management tool where we can predict, what's going to be our catering requirements so that we can reduce our food wastage. So we're investing on the large items and also on the small items, and they're all driving towards the targets that we want to achieve.
Brilliant. And I think it's business as usual is going to be very, very different in the years to come as we keep on learning and understanding the role we need to play. Thanks for that, Andrew. Sarah, back onto you, and to touch on a point that you made earlier, the whole transition to a sustainable and a green future that is just and fair. And I think we've heard a lot about that. The just transition, sorry, it eluded me even though I had all the words, is very topical at the moment. And the financial sector will obviously have a very significant role to play in that. What role do you see the financial sector playing in achieving this? And you spoke briefly earlier about the green mortgages and the green loans and those types of services coming on board and becoming more readily available. But we do need a lot more than that. Yeah. What do you feel needs to happen for us to achieve the types of targets and ambitions set before us?
Yeah, So thanks, Nick. It's a great question. That's one we actually cannot overemphasize in terms of the role of finance. We had Christiana Figueres, who chaired the Paris Agreement. She spoke at our sustainability conference last November, and she gave a quote which is, "Where the money goes, the carbon follows." And that really just kind of sums it all up for us in terms of our role as central to the transition can't be overstated. However, we are really, really clear that we simply cannot do it by ourselves. It requires unbelievable levels of collaboration, both in terms of industry, in terms of policy and politics and regulators, but also things like, the low carbon pledge, becoming signatories to TCFD, the CDP, relevant for your business and your organization. So we see ourselves absolutely kind of central. However, we can't do it by ourselves. So it's a bit like the old push and pull. We have to get to a point where more stakeholders are demanding more of us. And certainly we're seeing it from a regulatory and investor perspective. We're seeing it from an employee perspective and customer, but there needs to be more. And that's why you need to have a clear path. You don't have to have all the answers from the get-go, but you do need to have a clear path and supported very much by your stakeholders around you to do this. One of the points that the Minister touched on, and I think you touched on it as well, is while this presents enormous challenges, okay, and no one can overstate that, there is unbelievable opportunity in terms of this transition. Yeah. And there's unbelievable opportunity for Ireland in terms of this transition. One of the things we've also done is launch a 50 million equity fund for SMEs. Ireland is great in terms of being innovative, having a pilot for, all kinds of innovation and startups, etc. We want to invest and encourage that kind of ideation, that kind of collaboration, to really present this as a huge opportunity for business, for society. So we see ourselves absolutely central, but we simply can't do it by ourselves. We need the kind of collaboration that platforms like today bring.
Fantastic. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing the transition within the sector and what comes from that. And you touched on it, collaboration again. That's a word we've heard a lot from all of our speakers today, is going to be key to driving this forward. And opportunity with change comes a significant amount of opportunity available to all of us as well in our organizations. Okay. Last couple of questions, one each. It's our quick fire questions for the day. Jill, Sarah, it's the same one for both of you. As practitioners, and to all your peers out there in attendance today, what are your top tips for those organizations starting the SBT journey and really getting their businesses bought into it? Jill, maybe I'll start with you there.
Okay, no problem, Nick. So top tips. I would say climate action is a hard subject. So spend time with key decision makers, make sure that they understand the risks of not taking action and the benefits of having targets and a clear plan in place. Again, strong leadership, strong governance, key to managing climate-related risks, to being able to do this effectively, and then availing of the opportunities as they arise. Have a cross-functional team of key people to monitor developments and implement the plan. We don't have all the answers yet. Don't let this dissuade you from taking action and moving forward. And then finally, cooperation is vital. So get your suppliers, your peers, competitors, and customers all working together on shared solutions. Fantastic. I think that's it from me. Yeah.
Thanks, Jill. Sarah, on to you.
Yeah, I like working in three, so I'll give it three. The first is actually understand your current state, understand actually what your own impact is in terms of the scope of climate action. Secondly, once you understand, where you have a role to play, set priorities, set targets, be really clear, because without those, you won't get leadership, you won't get buy-in, because you'll be talking to different stakeholders internally and externally. Really, really clear to understand your state of play, set priorities and targets around that, and finally make it practical. So don't leave it that it's kind of all theory. There has to be practice. practicalities behind it. For us, you know, mortgage lending is probably the bread and butter of a huge amount of what we do. So we've spent an awful lot of time, and I know it's in the government action plan and everyone talks about it in terms of green mortgages and retrofitting the current housing stock. That makes it really tangible for people to actually understand. So they're the three.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And then Andrew, ending off with you, to all those CEOs and senior leaders in attendance today, what is your piece of advice if SBT sustainability is not a common occurrence at the discussion table at their senior leadership team meetings?
Look, I think as a senior leader, I would say to you that this is no longer a choice. We must take actions to safeguard our planet for future generations. Inaction is the same as being a climate change denier.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to set meaningful goals, collaborate with others, and track and measure success. Just to sum up, the scale of the challenge is not to be underestimated, but we have many reasons to be optimistic. Like the last year has shown how our ability as businesses and citizens to adapt under pressure. And if we are smart about it, we can make the leap and use the transition to create jobs and value in the economy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And on that note, I just want to thank all of my speakers so much for sharing your insights today. Joel Higgins from Dawn Meats, Sarah Dempsey from AIB, and Andrew Flynn from Janssen. And I'm going to hand back over to Thomas to close us out.
Nick, thank you very much. And what a phenomenal conversation we had, and what a clear set of tips and guidelines we got for practitioners and for leaders out there. Let me just say a few final concluding remarks in the minute or so left. Number one is, we never thought we were going to be trending on Twitter. We never thought we were going to have not one, not two, but several CEOs tweeting personally about their commitment to the low carbon pledge. So I really want to highlight the importance that this has and that it continues to have. Number three, say a strong congratulations again to the signatory companies, and to say that our ambition is to sign up more companies to this low carbon pledge. Some of the commentary on Twitter was talking about the complexity. What does net zero really mean? How are we going to get there? And that's where we see the pledge as the instrument that will bring the support and the guidance to make that happen. And we really look forward to working with you. And the final line, this is an opportunity for Ireland. We need to build back better, or whatever that means. We need to find the new redefinition of what our competitive advantage is going to be. We can do it. We know we can do it. We have the ideal mix of companies and of experts, and we really need to think about the role that the low carbon economy is going to play in our economy and our society. So the call for action is very simple. Ensure that you have understood what does the long-term vision of your business looks like when it comes to the low carbon economy. And the key element to that is disclosure, and it is setting targets. I just want to say a few thank yous. Firstly, to Professor John Sweeney. I know he's here with us this morning, and say, John, if it wasn't for your ambition and inspiration, we wouldn't be here. The second thing I want to say is that this Saturday is Earth Hour, so not to forget that is a very meaningful appointment in our calendars, and hopefully companies will continue to mark it as it should, even if we're in the virtual world. And just to say thank you again to our speakers, Mr. Ryan, to our panelists, Sarah Dempsey, Jill Higgins, and Andrew Flynn, and my colleagues, Maura Horgan and Lorraine Wall, who manage everything related to this event, and to you, Nick Reynolds, our environmental leads. You have done a superb job in pursuing our members to sign up to the pledge, and we look forward to much more. Now, there's a couple of events to leave you with in terms of our calendar. You can see them on your screen. We're doing an event with SSE Ireland on the 20th of April to get a deep dive on COP26 and Glasgow and what's up and coming there. And secondly, on the 10th of June, we're launching our annual low carbon pledge report with PwC. And finally, and out of time, 6th October, please make sure that that's on your diaries. It's our sustainability revolution, where we're going to bring both our environmental, low carbon, and social dimensions together for a true conversation on how we can exploit that opportunity for Ireland and sustainability. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and thank you. Goodbye.